What's up, everyone? We're all 49ers. I'm Grant Cohn. Below me is Jack Hammer. To his right is Jose Sanchez, and above him is Leo Luna. I always get right and left mixed up. Today, we're going to debate 8 topics, and we'll answer some questions if we have time. We're going to start with Debo Samuel. It's looking like he might play. He's been a full go in practice. There was a report last week that he would return to practice but not play right away. It's starting to look like he might play. Hasn't been limited in any fashion. So what I want to ask you, starting with Leo, do you think he will play? Do you think he should play? And what are realistic expectations for Debo Samuel coming off this injury?
I think he would play. And I still think he should play as well. The more weapons you could provide Nick Mullins, because that's who we're presuming is going to start this game, is going to help him out even more. As far as realistically what he's going to do, I think it's going to be a lot like what we saw from Brandon Ayuk week 2, to where they're going to give him some routes, some receptions, but they're not going to fully unload him like they did with Ayuk against the Giants, just because you want to ease him in. Shanahan talks a lot about football shape, so you don't want to just throw him out there and instantly give him 10 touches.
I think he's going to play as well, but I think I'm going to go on the reverse on Leo's. And I think they are going to try to involve him heavily because they just wanted him just to really – there's no better team to really unload against than the Eagles. That's such a depleted team. It feels like every year we're always talking about, they're secondary. And what do you know? Again, their secondary is still inadequate. So you got Debo out there, Brandon Ayuk, and that's going to be – and if Kittle even plays, who knows? But probably not. But either way – Debo, you want to unload him against this team. I already can see not a ton of end rounds, but they're going to get us some nice looks for the jet sweeps. They're going to probably instant slant for Nick Mullins, get him comfortable, and it's going to be a nice showcase day for him.
I think that he'll play. I don't think they're going to use him very much. I think they're going to be easing him in over the next couple of weeks to really get him ready for that Rams game. So, I look at maybe 4 or 5 touches for Samuel on Sunday if he plays.
Yeah, I'm with Jack. Jack's real sensible. He's a former coach. He understands how these coaches think. And the way I look at it is it'd be really irresponsible to throw Debo Samuel in there with a full workload when he missed training camp and there was no preseason. I mean, right now he's at square one. The way that they could conceptualize the next few weeks for him would be preseason. Give him a taste, like a quarter, because that's how it is in preseason. The first game is like 15 snaps. The second game's a little bit more. Give him 15 snaps. Give him 5 touches. That's fine. Get his feet wet so that he's ready to go a full game's workload against the Rams when the season gets crazy. I think that's what I'm going with there. But how do you expect him, if he does get his touches, real quick, before we move on, what do you expect they're going to be? Is it going to be an end around, a couple of runs? Is he going to be used the same way Ayuk was used last week? What do we expect? What's the game plan there? Jack?
I like to see him get him out there on an end around. They did that a lot with him really towards the end of last year. Not too much in the beginning of the season, but really starting around the last 5 weeks of the year, they really started doing that with him a lot. So I like to see him kind of get him back in that role, run a couple, one of those, and then a few short routes here and there, just to kind of get his feet wet and get his feet back underneath him for the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same way. Just mainly jet sweeps, end arounds, and those little easy slants, and just put the ball in his hands, so that way you don't have to let Nick do too much unless, you need a crucial third down or something, or for some reason, if the game's closer than it should be, then you're going to want to look for him on for the sticks or beyond. So I think he's going to be able to blend in there and transition well.
I think they're actually going to keep it a little light on the end arounds to where he's going to get none. Because if you're thinking about it, running from sideline to sideline, that's 50 yards there. And now you're going vertical. That's another 60, 70 yards potentially on one single play. Mm-hmm. I think considering the Jones fracture, they're going to want to keep it easy. And I don't see any end arounds coming for Samuel. They're going to leave that for Ayuk this go around.
I'm with you. I think they're going to be real conservative with how they use Debo Samuel. I have a side topic real quick, and I don't know the answer to it, and I don't expect you guys do either. But I'm going to throw it out there and something we can think about moving forward. The last few years, the jet sweep was like the rage in the NFL, and it's still effective. But it seems like defenses are pretty good at stopping the actual fly sweep. The motion can be confusing for them, but we saw it against the Giants. The Niners tried a couple of jet sweeps early with Brandon Ayuk. The first one didn't gain much. The second gained 9. When they go to the end around, though, it's big plays, 16, 25, 30 yards, and it's been that way since last year. Why are defenses so vulnerable to the end around, but they seem to be prepared to stop the jet sweep. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. So we're going to have to look at – that's a homework assignment for everyone. Figure out what it is. Jack, what do you think?
Well, we had talked about that yesterday a little bit, and I was looking at some of the film from the last few years with Shanahan. A lot of the bigger runs are on the like you said, on the end of rounds where you've got the look of the play going one way, but they're coming the other. So you've got what looks like a zone stretch going to the left, and they come back around the other way. And so that's throwing off the defense. And I think that's really what we're seeing there for the most part on those runs.
Right, because the run play is so good in and of itself, the defense has to honor it. And you have the entire defense flowing one direction and moving the wrong way when Debo Samuel gets the ball. I think there's something to that. And so when the jet sweep comes around, the defense is in position if you have a guy overhanging and setting the edge. Okay, enough of Debo Samuel. I just find that interesting. It's like defenses had one adjustment and Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel figured out a real simple readjustment. Yeah. Let's talk about this game still. Is there a matchup in this game that intrigues you the most? And if so, what is it? I'm talking with the Eagles. Who wants to start?
I'll go ahead and start again. So with the Eagles, it's going to be the 49 or the Eagles defensive line against the 49ers offensive line. Similar to the Giants, they have names, but they have even better names than the Giants, like Fletcher Cox in the middle. And that's been a weakness is the 49ers interior offensive line. So if you're able to control them, contain them, because that's at a point last week, the Giants defensive line did get to Nick Mullins a little bit, but obviously it didn't affect the game at all. The Eagles defensive line could affect it a lot more than the Giants did. So that intrigues me. How does that offensive line hold up, and how does Shanahan scheme his way out of that?
I think the one I'm looking forward to, just because I feel like I'm going to laugh at some instances, is the running backs / tight ends against the Eagles linebackers. How he's going to get those players into space, how Nick's going to deliver to them, especially to our boy Dwelly. So to see how he gets out there, because he's going to I feel like he's just going to abuse each one of these players. Jarek, Jeff Wilson, who knows most is going to play, but all these guys are just enough just to get those linebackers easily to bite on something, whatever, because you already know nothing's going to be for face value in terms of route running. There's always going to be some counter moves, some doubles, some trickery. So I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup in terms of just, wow, how much are the 49ers, how much is Kyle Shanahan going to embarrass this group just to really, like, look, I have a backup quarterback in Nick Mullins who actually should be considered starting caliber, and he's over there picking apart your linebacking core. So right on prime time. So I think that's the one that's really going to be interesting to see.
And then putting the pylon back up after it. Jack, you're up.
Yes, crucial.
Yes. I'm looking for the running game. I wrote about this a little bit yesterday, but I really want to see how they perform if they can get that thing going. They've just been really hit or miss so far this year. And just to see them start to really just kind of grind a game out would be nice for a change, especially against a team like this, with a short week coming up next week. That's a really good
one. I'm going to go with the offensive line against the Eagles defensive line. It's similar to last week. The Niners, what was interesting is they had a lot of problems with the Giants defensive line in the first half. They were shutting down the run game pretty consistently and moving Mullins off his spot. He had to scramble and run around and make some tough throws. And I thought what the Niners did was they just wore him down. They held the ball longer than the Giants. The defense kept the Giants from converting third downs. And by the second half, that Giants D-line had no gas left. So that's probably going to be how the Niners are going to have to attack this matchup as well, because they don't have a physical matchup advantage against Philly. So let's move on to the next topic. Jack, I want to stick with what you said. The Niners run game. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's good. Yards per carry. But we've watched all the carries, and we know it's based off of a few long runs. There's been a lot of negative carries and a lot of stuff stuffed at the line of scrimmage. From your expert analysis and observations, what is going on with the Niners run game right now? What is the biggest problem they have? If they have a biggest problem.
I don't see them getting very much push at the line at the point of attack, especially with Brunskill. It seems like he's always working laterally. He's getting basically stopped right there. He's not moving his man off the spot. See that a lot, really, out of everybody, and it just doesn't seem to be hitting on all cylinders. You go look at the first game of the season. They're on the goal line. They have they run that play, and one of the main reasons it doesn't work is because the Trent Williams and Brunskill, their shoulder pads collide, which knocks Brunskill off his track. He's not able to get there and make the block. It's just a lot of little things like that. And with Brunskill playing center throughout all of camp, I just don't think that front has been able to gel yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right on the money. Point of attack, especially perfect example of that goal line play. It's like those guys didn't get any push or any bulliness. I'm not seeing the same like quickness or the same like explosiveness, and I feel like it's a little bit expected because of how much musical chairs we saw in training camp. Granted, an offensive line just between Hronis, Daniel, everywhere. So this guy never got to settle in. So I mean, it kind of figures. I think it's gonna be interesting to see how it's gonna be after week 4 or 5 to see how much Brunskill really starts to get comfortable or should get comfortable by then. It's good that Garland's now back there to hopefully bring us some solidification, but he too missed all of training camp. And so it's just a lot of hopefully for their sake, getting the cobwebs off, dusting the rust, because the run game is important and controlling the time possession is so key for this offense to make that defense even more efficient with the missing players. It's just as long as if they can get that rust knocked off, which you hope it's rust, then they should get back to where they were last year.
Okay.
So what I'm noticing is the timing of the point of attack. Like Jose said, the chemistry is not really there yet. And then when you have a shortened off season, no preseason, it's hard to just pick that up week 1. On the goal play against Arizona, Brunskill was late. He ran into Trent Williams, and that kind of just upset the timing of the play. And that's been the narrative this first 3 weeks of the season. So once they get their timing back on the point of attack, not just attacking, getting that true timing down, that's when you're going to see this running game getting to its potential.
I agree that it's mostly an offensive line issue. I don't think it's a Kittle issue. Kittle's their best blocker, and he hasn't played much except for the first half of the first game. But from what I've seen, Dwelly's blocked well. He hasn't been a liability. He's actually been moving his guy, which is surprising. It's been the offensive line. Garland's been bad. Brunskill's been bad. McGlinchey's been bad. And I think for a run game that's as intricate as the Niners is, they really need a full offseason and a full preseason. So this is probably to be expected, especially since Brunskill was playing center the whole time. These guys are out of position. But I think we can't overlook the running backs. They don't have Raheem Mostert. And to me, what I saw, Jerick McKinnon is averaging 7 yards a carry. That's extremely impressive. But he's not the best option on 1st and 10. He just doesn't have very good vision. He doesn't hit the hole very hard. He's an excellent 3rd down back. He's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. A hell of a player. And it looks like he's come back, but I think that's a real downgrade from Raheem Mostert to Jerick McKinnon on 1st and 10 because Mostert just runs harder. So even if there's nothing there, Mostert's going to get a little bit more, in my opinion, than McKinnon does. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I saw it against the Giants. McKinnon looked slow, like if he was half speed again in the hole.
Thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm watching that game. I'm like, that's Raheem Mostert. That's 10 yards every time. But with McKinnon, it was more of a 2-3 yards per carry.
Final thing on this topic, I would like to see more of Jermichael Hasty. I was impressed with him during the game, and then when I watched the coach's tape, what he did on both of his carries was try to bounce the run outside, which I don't know if Shanahan likes. I think he wants his guy to get upfield, one cut and get upfield. But still, he's very electric. He runs harder than Jerick McKinnon right now. McKinnon's a good 3rd down back, and he's effective. But on 1st down, I want a guy who runs full speed into the line no matter what. And it seemed like Hasty has that. So I'd like to see him. Hopefully they give him some carries.
But to be honest, the 49ers probably don't want anyone to see any more Hasty. As Jennifer Lee Chan reported earlier this week that the 49ers asked her to not post anything on Hasty during the offseason. That's what she said in her report. Yeah, so.
And she did it? She should have wrote about him every day. What was she thinking?
Exactly. So,
I wrote about him.
Did they pay her? I don't know.
Hey, that's a great question. Exclusive
Okay.
interview.
Jeez, I would need a little kickback from the Niners to give him a favor like that. I don't know. I'm not on your payroll, bro.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about this quarterback controversy that doesn't exist, or does it? I think it's funny that Shanahan has to answer the question. It's a topic on the table. Everyone's like, there is no quarterback controversy. But if you have to say that enough, it's like there is one. So what I'm asking is, it seems like Mullins going to play on Sunday. If he plays poorly, obviously the conversation is over. It's Jimmy's team. It always has been Jimmy's team. It won't stop being Jimmy's team. But if Mullins goes out and does it again, throws for 350, a touchdown or 2, no picks, and basically looks totally in control of the offense, what happens next? Does Jimmy just take over the week after? Because it's interesting. When Shanahan asked it, he said 2 things that kind of contradicted each other. He said, this is Jimmy's team, and I don't look past the next week. So it seems what he's saying is, I'm not making any grand statements, but at the same time, we'll see what happens next week. It's a week-by-week proposition. So I don't know who's going first, but what happens theoretically, project, if Mullins goes out and tears it up again next week, this Sunday?
I'll go ahead and go.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. There's zero controversy. Although Mullins had a big game, 343 and 1 touchdown.
Hold on, before you get started, let me refine my question. Not what happens. Does Mullins continue to start? Do they keep him in the starting lineup? Or if he goes two for two, tearing it up, do they still bench him anyway if Jimmy feels healthy next week against the Miami? That's my question.
Yeah, you absolutely bench him because everyone gets excited for Mullins because he's like the little brother. You see your little brother go out there and throw 343, you're going to be really excited for him. Like, dude, like you killed it. Great job. That's exactly what it is with Mullins. Because if you look at some of that tape on there, he played well. I'm not saying he didn't, but you look at that tape, Jimmy Garoppolo's in. He's a much more accurate quarterback. He probably throws for 443. He had 2 touchdowns to Brandon Ayuk. That, look at, I understand. He had 2 touchdowns to Brandon Ayuk. That
I'm not arguing with you. You don't have to raise your voice. I'm just listening.
Way off. So Jimmy Garoppolo, you absolutely go straight back to him. Okay.
All right.
Grant's eyebrow raised.
I know, right?
Raised when you talked about him. He's like, don't you dare talk about Nick like that. No.
Yeah.
You're
That's my little brother.
You 100% stick with Jimmy Garoppolo because of if it's not performance, all right, I'll take a different angle. I'll touch something else. If forget about performance, but because of what you're paying him and because of what the message you're going to send to the team. Now, the reason, even if Nick does do good, you still have to do it because you pay him. But because if you start Nick again and Jimmy is healthy, you can't go back to Jimmy. That's not a good look. It's easier if you can go back to Jimmy and Jimmy starts playing bad after a good couple games or even a few games. And it's like, all right, this guy is like a good major cause why we're losing. Nick, hop back in there. Then that looks, not only does that look better just from a PR standpoint, we know they like to look good all the time, which is what the messages are trying to send, unless we're talking about face masks. That's why he didn't care about for against the Jets. But that's how it's going to be, in my opinion. I think because of how much they're paying him, they think he feels like he's the best option to win, and because they just want to make it look good. So if they let Jimmy come out and if he's the direct cause, and it's easier to bench Jimmy at that point. Because otherwise, if you bench Jimmy now and keep Mullins going forward, then it kind of feels like this is kind of where we're at. Unless obviously he's doing terrible, then they have to do Garoppolo, and then at that point, then it's all right. All right, now you have no idea what you're doing, and then it's just going to be more mixed messages than it needs to be.
Jack, what's going to happen if Nick Mullins tears it up on Sunday? What happens?
Well, what's going to happen if Mullins tears it up is it's really, I think you're really setting up a controversy. If the 49er fans, if you look at, what's been going on in just the last 6 months, 7 months with fans since the Super Bowl, especially, even go back to the playoffs, if Mullins tears it up this week and they go ahead and they sit him against Miami and Garoppolo is struggling, it's going to be, it's going to be rough. And then you got a really rough stretch after that. So
that's right.
This is San Francisco. I lived through Montana young. And at this point right now, Mullins is way closer to Garoppolo than Young ever was at that point. Young was not a good quarterback until about 1992, 91. He really struggled when he first got his chance. So, I right now at this point, I know I kind of was rough on Mullins heading into last week. I did say he'd play well. But I really don't. When I watch him on film, I don't see a whole lot of things that he's doing that Garoppolo is not, able to do. What I mean by that is Mullins. The things that Mullins can't do isn't much different than what Garoppolo can't do. A little bit of arm strength, but it's really not that big of a deal with the way that Shanahan schemes him up. Yeah,
I totally agree with everything Jack said. To me, it seems like it's kind of out of Kyle Shanahan's hands now. It's kind of an organic thing. If Nick Mullins goes out there and tears it up and throws for 400 yards or 350 or 300 and just wins convincingly and has a good game, you can't bench him. It just, even if you were Jimmy, it's like, why don't you? My ankle still hurts. Give me another week. It seems it would be so much easier to go back to Jimmy after a stinker. If Nick comes out and plays poorly against the Eagles, then everyone's going to want Jimmy back. But if Nick tears it up again and you go back to Jimmy, and as Jack says, he struggles, how do you not go back to Nick? How do you afford to lose games when you have a quarterback on the bench that is on fire? Not just good or impressive, but currently on fire. That's the scenario we're throwing out there. So it seems like Nick Mullins can control his own legacy. Sure, it's not his team, but they also take things week by week. And if he just happens to continue to throw for 300 yards a game, we'll see. I mean, it just seems like if he has another good game, we're going to hear next week from the 49ers, Jimmy's ankle still hurts. It still hurts a little bit. We're going to need one more week. And then what'll be interesting is what they do if Mullins plays against the Dolphins and what they want to do against the Rams. Because theoretically, you want Jimmy against the Rams for a lot of reasons. He's the starter. He's your guy. He's played the Rams recently. He's experienced. So I think it's interesting. You want Jimmy back for that game against the Rams, but who knows what's going to happen against the Dolphins? It's up to Nick, in my opinion. It's not really up to anyone else.
If you go back and you look at what happened in 2012 between Smith and Kaepernick, Smith was having
great
at the top, at the best that we've ever seen him play when he got injured. He never took the field again.
Never saw the field again, and it was a hot hand thing. I mean, Harbaugh came out and said it, which Shanahan won't do. But it's kind of the nature of the sport. If Nick Mullins comes in and tears it up, you can't take him out. He's like a relief pitcher throwing a no-no. I'm sorry, like when he starts giving up hits, I'll take you out. But for the time being, you're on the mound, buddy. So we'll see what happens. It's the hot hand theory, as created by Jim Harbaugh.
The issue is they will take him out and put Garoppolo in once he's ready. The best case for the 49ers is, hey, Nick Mullins does ball out, and then you could throw a second-round tender on him in the offseason, and now you're able to move Nick for a second-round pick. I think they know what Jimmy has, and they know what Jimmy can do. And after watching the game against the Giants, even with Mullins having a great game, there was still a lot of plays that were left on the table, and that's what Shanahan is going to see.
Okay, well, we'll see. We can't predict the future. It's an interesting thing to keep in mind when we watch. Let's look big picture. Through 3 games, what's the biggest pleasant surprise of the season for the 49ers for you guys? Leo.
I'm going to say Javon Kinlaw because, like you've stated earlier this week, it wasn't just yourself and it wasn't just a couple of beat reporters that were there at practice. It was everybody across the board saying, we don't know if this guy has it. He has a lot of pressure on his shoulders, being such a high draft pick, having to replace team captain in DeForest Buckner. And yet he's looked ahead of schedule in the first 3 weeks. Once he starts finishing off some of those sacks, oh man, this defensive line is going to be playing at a much higher level than they are currently.
I'm going to say maybe it's not so much a pleasant surprise, but it's like more a pleasant reassurance that to see that the 49ers depth is still really good. I know they didn't play 2 obviously very subpar opponents in both New York teams, but it's still very assuring to see that, hey, they lost a ton of players, probably arguably even more concentrated elite talent right now than they did at any point last year. And you got players all over stepping up. Like Leo said, Kinlaw is progressing hard right now. And you got Kerry Hyder in the back. You got that whole defensive line stepping up. You know, Fred Warner is just, I don't know, but there's another better middle linebacker out there right now playing better than him. The secondary is doing okay. It's fine. The offense still, I mean, aside from the offensive line woes that we know, just everyone is just like, it feels like it was collective effort. And when they beat the Giants, it just felt all around, even though, like we said earlier, the offensive line was slow in the first half. So I think it's just how deep it is, just how we can see like, all right, they're still deep and they can last long, even against average to subpar opponents, which is a great sign to see.
I'm going to go with the play of Kerry Hyder. He's been just doing really well.
Hyder.
He's looking like the Kerry Hyder of 2016, back when he was with Kasarek in Detroit, and they haven't missed a beat with him out there. You know, he's got 2 sacks now on the season, so that's definitely the guy for me.
Yeah, it's a great pick. I hadn't thought of him, but watching him on film, I mean, he looks like Nick Bosa. I mean, not, but kind of. And he's on pace for like 12 sacks this year. He's having a great year, really stepping up. I'm going to go with, what?
And he does the shrug, so you're right. He does look like Nick Bosa.
Yeah, he's doing his best Bosa impression. I'm going to go with Jerick McKinnon, even though I just criticized him for not being a 3-down back. We know that about him. He wasn't a 3-down back at any point in his life. I'm just impressed that he made it to the season. I mean, I was thinking he wouldn't make it through training camp. I've seen him a lot in camp get hurt and re-get hurt and re-get hurt. So good for him. And then the other guy I would also say is Jason Ferrett, although it's only been 1 game and he's going to need to show that he can do it consistently. I never thought he could come back and move like that ever again. And he didn't, in my opinion, move that well in camp. He looks really good. He can play man-to-man coverage. Those two, I had no expectations for them. Dwelly, I knew he'd be a superstar. Nick Mullins, I always called him the next Joe Montana, but those two guys I kind of had questions about. So that's my answer. All right. Biggest disappointment through the first 3 games, Jack.
I'm going to go with, I don't know if it's necessarily the play of Pettis, based off of everything that we're hearing from you guys, really out at camp. It sounded like he was, really coming on, and he's just been a flop. He's, only time we see him is on returns now, and that's only because James is hurt. So that's what I'm going with.
Yeah.
You took my pick, Jack, but I'm gonna go with the flip side. I think still being a disappointment is Akilla Witherspoon, just because I still had some hope for him, and maybe that's a little bit of the cornerback bias in me somewhat, but because I know if he could just get that confidence, but I just think it's shattered. I think he's done. He doesn't have any faith in his skill at all. I mean, it's not like he played terrible against the Jets or anything like that. I know he gave up that little dummy at the end, but it's just like I just don't see the same guy who I saw those first 3 weeks of last season. It's just maybe that was just a fluke, which is looking like it. This guy is definitely gone. I wouldn't be shocked if they were even considering trading him before Ferrett got injured, because I'm sure that's probably what they're even thinking of. Just like, hey, if we can get a 7th round pick for this guy, we'll consider it, because the fact that they immediately said, hey, Ferrett's healthy, get him in there, and they just said, Witherspoon, you can go back on the bench, just says a lot, which I'm not too buying into his injury. But yeah, I think I'm officially on the table that, Witherspoon's done.
Okay, I'm going to have to go with Mike McGlinchey. What we see the first 3 weeks. You had Joe Staley your first 2 years, and now you have Trent Williams there to mentor you in your first 3 years. What more do you have to ask for as far as mentorship? And then he's just been getting tossed around like a rag doll. Good thing he has a coach like Shanahan that knows how to not show your weaknesses, and he could get the ball quick out for the quarterback. But it's got to be McGlinchey, because now you just wasted a top 10 pick on a guy who cannot play left tackle. So he's stuck at right tackle, and now you're even questioning his future if he's going to be someone that's going to get a 2nd-year contract.
Those are good answers. I'm not disappointed in Mike McGlinchey, because I never thought much of him. I never understood that pick. He always seemed like a right tackle only kind of guy who was going to struggle in pass protection. So yeah, I mean, D Ford, not disappointed. I never thought he was going to make it through the season. He's hurt again. If you're disappointed that he's hurt, then you don't know D Ford. I guess the guy that I'm disappointed in is Quan Alexander. Although, again, he's just being himself, but he's still really young. He's younger than Reuben Foster. He had a reputation for being an awful tackler in, where was he?
Tampa Bay.
And what they felt was like, well, at least he's always around the action, and he may overrun the play, but he gives other people a chance to make the play, and we can teach him to tackle. I mean, the whole thing with the Pete Carroll coaches and the disciples is that they teach tackling in practice, the rugby technique. They put videos out on it. It's a whole thing. And they're good at it. But for whatever reason, Quan can't learn. And not only that, he makes mental errors every game. Every game, he makes way too much money to be playing like that. And it's like, is he even better than Dre Greenlaw and Azeez Al-Shaair? I mean, he may be more athletic, but he's so undisciplined. He puts the other 10 players on his defense in a bad position. So I would say Quan. And now he was hurt a lot last year. He didn't have an off season to, I guess, improve, but he needs to step it up quick, because right now he's the weakest link. And if you are the weakest link too long, then you have to go. Goodbye. Do you remember that game? That show was weak.
It's on again.
Is it on again? Is it the same lady?
No.
She was so mean.
She was so mean.
She was so mean. Okay. Speaking of Dante Pettis, let's talk about Dante Pettis real quick. It's looking pretty clear that he's not going to turn his career around with the 49ers. So now we're going to group him in with the famous wide receiver busts the Niners have drafted since I was a kid. And it started with J.J. Stokes. That was the gold standard. J.J. Stokes had a career, though. It's looking like J.J. Stokes may have a bigger imprint on the NFL than Dante Pettis. And then there's, of course, Rashawn Woods and A.J. Jenkins, two of the worst 49ers of all time. So where does Dante Pettis currently factor in the 49er wide receiver bust spectrum?
So Rashawn Woods, A.J. Jenkins, Dante Pettis, and then a humongous gap, like huge.
Yeah.
San Diego to San Francisco, size gap, J.J. Stokes. That's
J.J. Stokes wouldn't want to be in the same conversation as Dante.
No.
He would take that personally.
He's done a lot more. He's had a couple 700-yard seasons for the 49ers, not a different team.
Okay. Okay.
That's all right on the money. That ranking is just where's Dante? Where's Dante? Where were you doing so good? You cat the whole time at training camp, man. Now he's nowhere to be found. King of the Cat Simba out there. Like, where are you, dude? My friends, you flick more than my friends the way you're showing up. I mean, I don't know what. Was it just because he didn't get that? He didn't dive for the ball or something like that? I mean, some of the premier wide receivers don't dive for the ball, but because Jimmy's not healthy. Huh?
He ate Premier. I think they'd want to see a little bit better effort from him. Sorry.
Yeah, no, of course they do because he's all this talk about he can't stand criticism, but man, what use can you find for him? I mean, everyone last week was getting picks. Kendrick Bourne, Trent Taylor had that nice crosser. Ayuk started showing up. I mean, at this point, it's like why is he even on the team? Where people want to say trade him, but he has no trade value. What are you gonna get for him? What are you gonna get for him?
I agree. It's going to be Jenkins first, then Woods, and then Pettis. Yeah, I don't really even see Stokes much as a bust. I remember him as a decent number 2 to Terrell Owens, on some playoff teams, with Garcia as the quarterback. But yeah, that'd be the way I'd rank him.
Sorry, JJ. I take it. I was real young back then. I remember being disappointed because they traded up for you and everyone said you were going to be the next Jerry Rice and you weren't. And my 8-year-old brain couldn't wrap my head around the fact that you didn't live up to expectations, JJ, and you went to UCLA too, and I went to you, so I'm just disappointed.
Fanboy.
So, yeah, I mean, look, Dante is definitely in the Rashawn Woods, but I can't put him in the A.J. Jenkins category.
No.
A.J. Jenkins is Niner fans didn't see him. He had one catch. Niner beat writers saw him. We saw him every day in camp for a couple years, I think. At least one, probably two, and the guy couldn't even catch passes in camp. He couldn't get open one-on-one in those drills. Dante can. So Dante's way better than A.J. Jenkins. That's his legacy in the NFL. Way better than A.J. Jenkins. All right, let's move on.
I was going to say really quick, for people that are wondering, like, why do we keep bringing up Dante Pettis? It's because he has so much potential. I saw Justin Jefferson's game, the rookie from the Vikings. Dante Pettis moves a lot like Justin Jefferson. It's a little like flailing arms, flailing
nice little
legs.
wiggle.
But what I see differently is he has heart, he has hunger, and that's something we haven't seen from Dante Pettis.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Justin Jefferson, he played in the SEC, and we've seen what we've seen from Kinlaw and Debo is the physicality. Those guys come into the league and they don't seem overwhelmed. It seems like the jump from the Pac-12 to the NFL is huge, and some guys are overwhelmed. It's just too much for some guys. I got two more questions. One, let's stick with the game, and then two, a big picture D Ford question. We haven't asked it yet, have we? Have we? No. Okay. This game, we expect the Niners to win, I assume, but I don't know. Is there a scenario? Obviously, there is a scenario. What is the scenario where the Niners lose this game?
It's going to come on the protection. Can they get their timing down on the point of attack to actually run block this game, as well as the pass protection? If the Eagles have any shot at winning this game, it's going to come from that defensive line keeping them in this game. It's not going to come from Carson Wentz. It's going to come from their defensive line keeping in the game, putting pressure on Mullins and stopping the run game. That's the only way they have a near shot. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's the only chance they have.
And to piggyback off that, if the pass protection is poor, then that means Nick Mullins is going to get lit up. So the way that they choke this game is if Nick Mullins gets injured and you bring in C.J. Beathard in. So that's the only way if he gets hurt, because this team, if you put Beathard in,
don't go there.
No. So if Nick Mullins, there's no way they're going to lose this game. But if that pass protection is shaky and they cost Nick Mullins an injury and you put Beathard in, then the Eagles are most likely going to win that game. So that's the only way if Mullins gets injured.
Yeah. The only way that I see the Eagles winning here is if Mullins is turning the ball over, and we don't see the turnovers from Wentz that we've been seeing. He's been a turnover machine so far this year. And as far as the wide receivers go, they don't have much on the outside, but they do have some pretty good tight ends. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch those tight ends working against Alexander in coverage.
Yeah, it seems to me like the Niners defense is terrific, except when it goes against an offense that has a quarterback who can scramble around, buy time, and has one guy he can throw to. And I don't know if the Eagles qualify, but Carson Wentz is kind of mobile, and he has one guy he can throw to. And if the Niners are just going to play zone coverage all day, Ertz will be open. Now, they have been playing much more man recently. But it seems to me the Niners have to have an answer for the zone read or scrambles or something. because they were totally unprepared for Daniel Jones. It's like they didn't know he could do that. And Carson Wentz is more mobile. They have Jalen Hurts as well, who could play. Look, if Doug Peterson is paying attention and watching the film, he's going to have this in his game plan because you have to. You have to attack the Niners D that way. So if the Niners give up a bunch of long runs to the quarterbacks of the Eagles and let Carson Wentz buy time and just throw pass after pass to Zach Ertz, they could lose. So they have to have a plan for that, in my opinion. But what do I know? Last question.
Yeah, what do you know?
Oh, I know. Last question, and this is your topic, Jose. So you better have a good answer. Otherwise, you're out. Otherwise, you're muted. Can I mute people? I actually can mute people. I'm going to turn into Tony Reali. If I don't like your answer, you're out.
You got to give us points at least. You got to give us points.
All right, I'll figure that out too.
At least that'll be funnier.
All right. So now we're into year 2 of D Ford. He didn't play much last year. He's not going to play much this year. They traded a second-round pick for him, gave him a big deal, but they went to the Super Bowl last year, and he played in that game. So was that trade? Did they lose that trade, or was it worth it, given what happened last year? Who wants to go first?
I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, okay. Absolutely, you lost that trade because not only did you give up a second-round pick, you had to pay D Ford, and his contract. If we want to erase that, Buckner would still be a 49er. And then you could have had 4 years of service with guys like Jeremy Chin, Zach Bond, Matt Hennessy. If you went and drafted Matt Hennessy, then you wouldn't have Tom Compton on this team, so it solves that issue.
Love Tom Compton.
And so
I love how Tom Compton is inactive every freaking week. That's so funny to me. Keep going.
Exactly. And Matt Hennessy has played well so far for Atlanta. So there's other guys you could have had. Yeah.
Good name.
The Bay Area would have loved him.
Yeah.
But
seriously.
You had those names that I just said on 4-year deals, cheap deals, rookie deals, and you would still have Buckner on your team. So even though he was effective last year for the 49ers, D4, that was a big picture. It's absolutely an L, especially since they did not win the Super Bowl, and that's the main thing on this.
Leo's fired up today. Jose,
let's go.
It's because his internet's working. That's why. That's why it's fired up. But no, it's 100% a loss. But and for exact same points Leo pointed out, that's what I wrote down. But I think it was a trade that, it was kind of worth it in a way because that pass rush in 2018 was god awful. Like I swear, it was like it's kind of funny how the two Bay Area teams at the time had the worst pass rush in the league. You had the Raiders that had like 13 sacks and the 49ers weren't too far off either. And it was just like, God, where's the cut? It was like DeForest Buckner and a bunch of scrapyard junk you got right there.
Dare you classify Cassius Marsh that way? Okay.
Cassius who? Cassius, what's he doing now? But anyways, yeah. So I kind of and considering how Kyle Shanahan loves that unit, he says it. That's the number one unit you need to build and stack from. That's why they always draft defensive linemen every year in the first round. So in that sense, like I get it. It was a trade out of desperation, and that desperation allowed them to had them overlook. Hey, why are the Chiefs not re-signing him? Why do they want to trade him to you? Do you not realize his injury history? What else do they know about his injury history that you don't know? But, like I said, that desperation because it was like, we don't have many options. We need to inject some effectiveness into this pass rush. And it worked when he was healthy. It was good for that year. Had they won that Super Bowl, I think we would be saying yes, like Leo said. Yeah. But I think another thing that maybe shouldn't get overlooked is it was a little bit worth it to get Nick Bosa a little benefit from Ford out there because that's why he scored almost all of his sacks with Ford in the field. I mean, not to say Bosa probably wouldn't still have been successful, but at least with Ford there, they weren't having to at least 100% focus every game on Bosa until it turns out, all right, this guy is a beast. We need to throw the spikes, throw the speed bumps, throw whatever. So it's a loss, but I think it's something at least like, hey, they swung for the fences in a way a little bit.
Jack.
It was a short-term win, but a long-term loss. They got what they needed. At that point, they didn't know that they were going to be able to get Bosa at the number 2 pick when free agency hit. Sure. They needed to get a defensive end. They got lucky with that whole deal working out the way that it did. And so last year, we don't know if they make the Super Bowl without him. He had some big plays early in the year. Yeah. He played well in the playoffs. Long term, you're losing out on somebody that could have been with your team for another 5 years possibly.
Yeah. Look, in a vacuum, it's a god-awful trade. I mean, you traded a second-round pick and gave him that deal, and you got 300 snaps. I mean, it couldn't have been worse. But put some context here. Remember where the Niners were at as an organization going into last season. In my opinion, they were all on the hot seat. You may disagree. They had 6-year deals, but historically, you don't get to start a tenure missing the playoffs 3 years in a row.
Yep.
Any coach, GM that misses the playoffs 3 years in a row, historically, there's some exceptions, get fired. And I think the Niners knew that. I think there was some urgency heading into last year, and they knew we got to at least make the playoffs. So what the Niners did was go all in. They pushed all their chips in the middle and made sure no one was getting fired. And I get that. So because it's like if you hold on to that cap space and you don't make the playoffs, then you just set up your successors, the people who are going to replace you. So to me, it's like, look, we got to make sure we make the playoffs. Let's bring in D Ford. We know that the Chiefs don't really trust him for whatever reason, but the Chiefs, Andy Reid, he has job security. We don't. Let's make the playoffs and live to play another season. It worked. So if I were Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh, I would have done the same thing because I don't want to get fired and give the next guy cap space. Screw the next guy. My job. So that's the way I looked at it. It was a necessary thing to do.
And plus, they knew they were going to get Nick Bosa because everyone knew Kyler Murray was going to the Cardinals. So it's like, hey, but we know Buckner's raw. All we got to do is try to get Armstead. That's why you bring Kaczmarek in. And then if we got Bosa and 4, then it's like, cool, we'll be straight. That'll be very, very straight for us to have finally an effective pass rush. And so they can stop, so they can reduce the amount of defensive snaps that are out there.
We're done. Real quick, though, we're going to be doing this again tomorrow every week. And people are saying that I should be streaming on Twitch. I don't know. I stream on Periscope, on Twitter, on Facebook. If you like Twitch, I'll do Twitch. So let me know. Tweet at me, email me, call me. Don't call me. But just let me know if Twitch is something you guys are interested in because we're trying to get ourselves out there to everyone because people need to hear what we're saying about the 49ers because it's brilliant. Guys, this was the best all 49ers roundtable in the history of all 49ers roundtables. Thank you so much for your work today and everyone who watched. See you tomorrow.